Every generation of games, there are always classics that define an era and set the standard for better or worse of what games should be. Whether it be Nintendo in the 80s, bringing games to the mainstream, Mortal Kombat for single-handedly creating the ESRB, Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time for bringing games into 3D space, Call of Duty 4 for shaping the standard of first-person games on the 360 and PS3, Skyrim for showing you that you can milk a game more than a studio working for EA, or Breath of the Wild inspiring the standard of what open games should look like going forward. There's a dark side to all of this as well, with games like Destiny or series like Assassin's Creed bringing live service models into usage by every publisher, or Overwatch popularizing the use of loot boxes and gambling-like mechanics directed at people without fully developed brains, and minors that aren't Overwatch players as well. If you exist, you've probably seen no shortage of praise for Baldur's Gate 3. Whether it be hearing about the high standards it sets for gaming, finally having a true Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition experience brought to video game form, or just knowing about getting down and dirty with Halsin when he's a bear. This game has created a lasting impact on video game culture that will shape our expectations of what games can and should be. So what is it about Baldur's Gate 3 that we love so much? And what are the fair and unfair ways that our perspectives on the games industry as a whole change when we experience this masterpiece? Before we get started, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to let the algorithm know that you think I'm a cool guy. You're all my beautiful little PogChamps, and I appreciate all of you. I'm probably cutting that out. Also, make sure to check out the Truant, who let me use some of his footage for this video. He makes really fun Baldur's Gate 3 videos where he does solo runs showing off what each class in the game is capable of. The original Baldur's Gate was released in 1998 by Black Isle Studios and BioWare back when they made innovative RPGs, with the studios being given permission to use the Dungeons & Dragons IP, a modified version of the advanced D&D 2nd edition rules, and the Forgotten Realms setting to develop their game. The game was worked on by a passionate team, with the lead programmer having read the entirety of the Forgotten Realms book series, as well as the backgrounds of the game being individually rendered rather than being tiles, which was pretty unusual for the time. If you need more proof of their passion, they had to program Thaco into the game, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Before its late December release, the studio only expected 200,000 copies to be sold worldwide in the life cycle of the game. Defying all expectations, the game released to universal acclaim, with the initial 50,000 copies that were released selling out immediately, with 500,000 copies being sold by the end of February of 1999 and reaching 1 million units sold by the November of that year. It was a hit. After the success of Baldur's Gate, Black Isle Studios had to follow it up with something bigger and better. The developers scoured message boards, read reviews, and investigated internal criticism to find which areas they could improve on from the first game. Whether it be graphical improvements, gameplay tweaks, new enemies, or anything else they could think of, they wanted to add as much as they could to make a sequel to follow up their big hit. This came at a cost though. At the most intense stages of crunch, the developers were working nearly 70+ hour weeks, 9 AM to 9 PM Monday through Friday, and 9 AM to 6 PM on Saturdays. Eventually, the blood, sweat, and tears paid off in late September of 2000 with the release of Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn, selling nearly 200,000 copies in the United States by the end of 2000, and 1.5 million copies worldwide by the end of 2002. With the success of the series, a hack-and-slash spin-off game, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, was created by Snowblind Studios, as well as the kickstarting of the development of Baldur's Gate 3. No, not that one. Baldur's Gate 3 The Black Hound was inspired by the use of BioWare's Aurora engine in Neverwinter Nights that offered devs extra flexibility in their design. However, at publisher Interplay, there was some struggling behind the scenes, with CEO Brian Fargo resigning from the company in January of 2002 when their attempts at moving over to the console gaming market had failed. With new CEO Hervé Khan making the unpopular call to cancel various projects being worked on, with their stock later being delisted from the Nasdaq for dropping too low in value. In 2003, they were hit with a lawsuit from Vivendi Universal over breaches of contract and failure to pay for rendered services. This would later become a pretty consistent theme within the lifespan of the company. Also in 2003, Interplay would lose rights to develop games using the Dungeons & Dragons IP for PC, resulting in the canceling of Baldur's Gate 3 and shifting Black Isle Studios to console releases. Black Isle Studios finished up work on Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 before being shut down in December of 2003, later going on to form Obsidian Entertainment and work on Neverwinter Nights 2. Interplay's streak of bad luck would continue with them being sued by Snowblind Studios over their unauthorized use of their Dark Alliance engine, halting all development on the Baldur's Gate series and spin-offs. In early June of 2004, Interplay employees found themselves locked out of their Irvine offices. By June 7th of that month, it was reported that Interplay was being shut down by California labor investigators over unpaid royalties, unpaid labor, and not having workers' compensation insurance. 2 days later, they announced that they secured the funds to pay back their fines. Also on the same day, it was announced that parent company Titus Interactive was declaring bankruptcy. Past that point, Interplay struggled and never really found the heights of success that they had before, eventually finding their niche as a company. Now they just kind of float through the ether as a company that does re-releases and not much else. In comes our next challenger, Larian Studios. Founded in 1996, Larian specialized in the top-down, real-time, complex RPG style that was present in Baldur's Gate. Best known for their Divinity series that spans 7 games. They even approached Wizards of the Coast about taking a crack at the series after the release of Divinity Original Sin in 2014. However, the request was denied, with Wizards of the Coast saying that the studio was still too new to the industry to be trusted with the IP. This attitude soon changed in 2017 with pre-release materials from Divinity Original Sin 2 convincing Wizards of the Coast that these were the developers that they were looking for to pass the torch to. So began the development on Baldur's Gate 3. Yes, that one. With the game being teased in 2019, a week prior to E3. The game entered early access in October of 2020, and in August of 2023, the game continued the trend of the series, releasing to universal acclaim. So let's take a look into this game a year later to see what makes this game so great. Baldur's Gate 3 uses the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rule set as the basis for its mechanics. While it would be a video by itself to explain every detail of what this entails, I'll try to condense it into how it's implemented into the game in a couple of paragraphs. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons works on an action-based system. Every turn you get an action, a bonus action, and a move action. Actions are going to be the basis of most of the things that you'll do in the game, such as attacking, most spells, throwing, dashing for extra movement, etc. Bonus actions are mostly going to be ancillary things like jumping, shoving, less impactful spells, offhand attacks, drinking potions, and etc. And when I say etc., I don't mean that I ran out of things that I could list off and I put that at the end of the list to pretend that I know a lot more than I actually do. I never did that in previous videos. There's so many things that I'm leaving out there. Movement actions are self-explanatory. You move. Casters have spell slots that they use for spells, with the level of the slot determining what spell can be cast with it. You can also take a short rest for a quick heal and restoration of certain resources, or a long rest for a full heal and a full restoration of your resources. There's 6 ability scores that determine what your character will be good at. There's strength, which determines your strength. How much weight can you carry? How far can you jump? And how hard can you throw a goblin? Yeah, we're gonna throw you at you. Oh my god, it's so good, bro. It's so good. Most weapon attacks will use this stat. Dexterity determines your ability to sneak, pickpocket, pick locks, dodge attacks, and can be used to determine your damage with certain weapons. Constitution determines your hit points, your ability to concentrate on spells, and resist poisons and disease. Intelligence is a stat that's useless, unless you're a wizard, for the most part. It's used to recall knowledge about certain subject matter and will determine how powerful a wizard's spells are. Wisdom is the stat that will determine how well you're able to read into the intentions of others, be aware of your surroundings, handle animals, and resist most spells that affect the mind. This is the main stat that determines how powerful a cleric, druid, or ranger's spells are. Charisma is the stat that will determine your ability to persuade, intimidate, deceive, perform, and cast spells if you're a bard, paladin, sorcerer, or warlock. There are 12 classes that form the basis of the playstyle that you'll go with. Barbarian is a class that revolves around its rage mechanic, making you take less damage from enemies and you deal more damage. The Barbarian is a kind of health-based tank at its most fundamental level. Give me a break, bro. Give me a break. Okay, maybe if I like kill this guy, maybe like his body will like be closer to me. And then like I can grab his corpse, right? No. Open large oppression of peacocks? Yeah. Bro, get fucked with that shit. The Bard is a charisma caster that focuses on utility and healing spells, with the ability to play musical instruments, have some extra skill proficiencies, inspire their allies, as well as the inclusion of some silly extra role-playing dialogue lines. Clerics are wisdom-based casters that get their spells from the god they worship. While their spells generally focus on healing and utility, some types of clerics can have more offensive spells and abilities. If you want to play a tankier kind of caster, the cleric is your choice. Druids are wisdom casters that harness the power of nature, focusing pretty heavily on utility spells with the occasional healing and offensive spell mixed in there. They also have the ability to wild shape into various animals. Let's do a first for a 1d8. Nice, bro. Fuck yeah, my guy. The fighter is a pretty straightforward class. They fight stuff. They can use all types of weapons and armor and have abilities that focus on using technique and breaking past their limits to fight enemies. The monk is another martial class that focuses on hand-to-hand combat, high movement and mobility, and stunning enemies with their blows. The paladin is a charisma-based half-caster that swears an oath to uphold certain ideals. They have healing and utility spells and can use those spell slots for smiting enemies to deal a large amount of radiant damage. The ranger is a half-caster that uses wisdom and has various healing and utility spells similar to the druid. They have terrain that they're familiar with to give them certain bonuses. Some rangers can have beast companions, be a stealth archer that lurks in the dark, or be an interdimensional warrior. But no, don't add the Dinkus subclass to the game or anything. I didn't want to play Horizon Walker. The rogue is a class that focuses on stealth, mobility, and having various skills at their disposal. While they don't get multiple attacks like other classes, they have a sneak attack that deals a ton of damage if they hit an enemy under certain conditions. The sorcerer is a charisma caster similar to the wizard with limited spells that focus on damage and utility. While they have limited spells, they can augment them with meta magic to make their spells bonus actions, cast 2 spells at once, extend spell range, as well as many other things. Warlocks are casters with limited spell slots, but get eldritch invocations that allow them to augment their playstyle through giving them extra spells, extra abilities, or a buff to their attacks. They can also take certain packs that give them different playstyles, such as being Master of the Blade, Tome, or have the Chain for a familiar. The Warlock offers the most customization within a class out of every class you can play. The Wizard is the only intelligence-based caster in the game that focuses on damage and utility spells, and can focus on a school of magic to make those spells more powerful. Wizards can learn from scrolls as well, giving them a wide range of spells that they can cast. You can also multi-class if you want, to create your own playstyle and combine abilities from multiple classes. Don't play on the lowest difficulty if you want to do this though, because they don't allow you to. Now that our full explanation of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition brought to Gameform is done, let's talk about the game. The game features 6 origin characters, 1 customizable origin character, and 1 customizable character that can be whatever you want them to be. So let's go over them. Shadowheart is a half-elf cleric of Shar, goddess of darkness and loss, giving up memories of hers to complete a divine mission. Gale is a wizard of incredible talent that let his ambition get the better of him when he stepped into the business of gods, and now he has to pay the price for it. Astarion is a half-elf rogue who is a vampire spawn that escaped his master. Now he finds himself unshackled by the constraints of the sanguine hunger, since he's been infected with the illithid parasite. Will is a human warlock that made a pact with the devil Mizora, giving him the power to defeat devils and demons, but at the cost of being at the beck and call of an evil patron. Lae'zel is a Gyth Yan warrior raised in the astral plane, seeking ascension from the Lich Queen Vlaakith, but finds herself mixed up with an illithid parasite tadpole in an unfamiliar plane. Karlach is a tiefling barbarian that escaped her service to the devil Zariel to the material plane. The infernal engine where her heart should be seems to not be working as it should outside of the hells, and is set to kill her. The Dark Urge is a customizable origin character that has no memories of their life before being infected with the illithid tadpole, but they have an insatiable urge for slaughter, torture, and bloodshed. Will you overcome your nature, or embrace it? The final character, and the one that most people will go with on their first run through the game, is a custom character that can look like and be named whatever you want them to be. But the default name that the game gives you, and what the Baldur's Gate community refers to them as, is Tav. For the backstory of my character, I decided to play as an escaped slave of the House Ban Ray, that learned if you can't beat the ways of the Drow, you join them. You can have any backstory that you want for your Tav, as long as it ends with them waking up on the cart to Helgen.
Hey, you.
Now our game kicks off with our character waking up on the Nautiloid, a Mind Flayer ship. Our character most likely has a question of, where are we? And so do I. Now, have you looked at the tutorial level and thought about how it was laid out? The answer is most likely no, and that's a really good thing. So to start off, you walk to the next room and have an interactable elevator thing leading up to your first check. The developers make sure to have the stakes really low to introduce you to the concept of using your skills during dialogue. You keep moving and meet your first ally that helps you in the fight ahead. The game makes sure to keep things pretty simple. You have a fighter that hits things with you and is probably the most straightforward class at level 1. You fight some imps, which are pretty simple enemies that either attack with weapons or firebolts. It's also on a pretty flat room, so you can focus on learning the mechanics and not have to worry about terrain. You're introduced to what climbable ledges will look like in the future as well. When you make it to the next room, the game ups the amount of stakes as well as the decisions that you can make. You meet Shadowheart, who is trapped in the pod, and the game shows you that there are multiple allies that you're going to have to deal with that have different perspectives and wants that you have to balance as a party leader. Lae'zel is a mission-oriented character with a straightforward warrior's mindset, contrasting with Shadowheart, who tends to be more cunning and think about solving conflict in a less direct way, with more trickery and subterfuge involved. While there are a couple more decisions to make, it's still a pretty straightforward area, with you moving to the next room, grabbing the thing, and passing the check to rescue Shadowheart. Or you can just leave her there. That's also an option. It also shows you the danger of the mind flayers and what they do to their victims. The final fight of the tutorial shows you what the game is pretty much going to be about. You have the mind flayer threat right in front of you, while powers beyond your comprehension, devils in this case, show up to take advantage of the situation that you're caught in between. There are also some explosives located nearby as well that you can use to help you in the fight. The main objective of this encounter is to run to the end and activate the transponder, showing you that not every encounter is about killing the enemies, and sometimes there are other objectives that you need to prioritize instead. Now that you've survived your first few encounters, you wake up on the beach. The map here is laid out in a pretty intelligent manner. No matter which way you take, most likely you'll run into 2 or more allies along the way. If you go west and save Shadowheart, you'll most likely run into her, Astarion, and Gale, and possibly Lae'zel. If you go the other direction, you'll find Shadowheart for sure, Gale, and possibly Lae'zel again. By the time you get to the fight at the Grove, you'll have a full or nearly full party by the end of it, as well as probably being level 2. During the Grove fight, the game shows you that you can use terrain to your advantage. You're usually starting the fight next to a rocky hill that you can become the king of and take the height advantage. Damn, I really did roll minimum damage there, my guy. After the fight, you're brought to the Grove, where you can meet and recruit Will, as well as be introduced to the conflict between the Druids and the Tieflings. The Druids believe that the Tieflings are attracting outsiders and goblins to the Grove and seek to oust everyone, while the Tieflings need safe haven from the goblins who are organized at a level not typical of their species. You'll see various Tieflings working on their craft, fighting, or stealing to get by, showing you the desperation of where they're at. You're directed towards a Goblin Camp nearby, but past that point, the game sets you off on your own. It's all up to you to make your choices and create your own adventure. While I could go over every side quest and how it's designed, I'll mostly be going over a lot of the main story beats, areas, and whatever I deem to be relevant. No. Fuck off.
See if there's a healer to be found first of all.
Now there are many resolutions to the Grove questline. You can either expose Kaga as a shadow druid to stop the ritual, kill the goblin leaders, allow the ritual to be completed, leaving the tieflings to their doom, or join the goblins in their raid on the Grove. Nearby is the blighted village that the goblins have taken over that has quite a lot of content in this small little area. You can fight the goblins, help out a poor gnome, fight some spiders. Will this alert? Will not. Fuck yes. Alright, here we go. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Throw down with some ogres, or try to discover some magical secrets. One thing this game does really well is content density. You can tell that Larian tries to pack as much content as they can into as small an area as possible. This is all just in a small village. Next to it is the swamp, where you can continue the side quest where you expose Kaga, or fight a hag that has captured a young woman that just wants to bring her husband back to life, not knowing what kind of ancient powers she got herself tangled up in. Throughout the road, there are a bunch of things that you can do, like taking down a cave of goblins, fighting an owlbear, getting the good boy Scratch, napalming some gnolls, meeting Karlach, rescuing people from burning buildings, and trading with the merchant organization the Zentarim. Eventually, you'll encounter Raphael, who reveals himself to be a devil and offers you a deal to remove your tadpole. No matter what you say to him, he always says they'll wait until your situation is hopeless so that he gets the best contract out of it. But the fact that a devil wants to do business with you, that means that there's something you have of worth that you don't know about yet, and he wants it. At a certain point too, you'll meet with your spirit guardian that tells you about a war that's going on for the fate of Faerun, and that you need to embrace your illithid potential for. At This introduces us to our Illithid powers that we can put a point into whenever we get a tadpole from defeating a true soul or just finding them around. These powers are fun to play around with and are honestly pretty balanced, especially when compared to a lot of the things you can do in this game. As you approach the Goblin Camp, you get a vision of the 3 leaders of the Cult of the Absolute before you meet Volo, who just appears to be a silly bard guy at first. It seems that the goblins have repurposed an old temple of the god Selûne to be their outpost. The Goblin Camp has 3 different leaders as well. You can either choose to kill the leaders or side with them to slaughter the grove if you're playing an evil character, or a good character that just does some crazy things for love. There are some world-building conversations scattered around the place and small miscellaneous objectives that you can do. You can also free the druid leader Halsin, who joins you on your quest. The main mechanic of this area is the alarm drums that the goblins can run to call reinforcements, adding an extra layer of strategy to the area. What were once simple decisions to just kill the nearest guy now become calculated decisions of where to position to make sure you don't get overwhelmed.
Soon. First, I must set matters to rights in the grove, and you should celebrate your victory. After being dormant for so long,
What was that?
infection is unlikely to produce new symptoms spontaneously.
You're told to go to Moonrise Towers through the Mountain Pass or the Underdark. To enter the Mountain Pass, you first have to get through a Gyth Yan patrol by either passing some dialogue checks or just defeating the entire group. The main attraction of the Mountain Pass is the Rosymorn Monastery, where you learn that a nearby Gyth Yan creche is located to cure your parasite. This is such a well-designed area with so much going on, and feels so alive. You have the kobolds that found the leftover stores of wine and are hiding out in the brewery area with explosive barrel hazards that you can take advantage of. The Grimishkas that are there for some reason, I guess, and turn your spells against you. Giant eagles that have made a nest on the roof. An extremely long-lasting guardian of faith to show how powerful that the magic was in this place. And then the Gyth Yan creche under the monastery. All while you're dealing with this, there's still the underlying story of the monastery dedicated to the god Lathander, where you collect 4 different weapons to get a Dawn Master's crest for later. This area perfectly manages to capture the feel of a D&D dungeon crawl. There are rooms, each with their own unique threat, changes in environment and elevation, and story elements that you can spend your time with or just miss. This is honestly one of the best designed areas in the entire game. As you move to the Gyth Yan creche, your spirit guardian tells you to stay away. But if you move forward, you see an outpost that seems like people actually live there. There are rooms with clear purposes, supplies lining the walls, and shows you how the Gyth Yan just exists in the world. It's a small touch, but it really makes the world feel like a living, breathing place. As you move through the creche, the game does a pretty good job of showing you that not everything is quite as it seems. With the Zaith'isk used to remove the tadpole trying to kill you, you find that the Gyth Yan are very interested in the artifact that Shadowheart carries. You eventually meet the Lich Queen Vlaakith when you bring the artifact to the final room, who tells you to kill the person inside of it. You learn that the Guardian holds the secret to resisting Illithid influence that Vlaakith pretends to know, but actually doesn't, ruling the Gyth Yan as a false god. After you leave, the order is given by Vlaakith for you to be killed. You can continue on to find the Blood of Lathander, a powerful mace that you can take if you have the Dawn Master's crest. Otherwise, you can take it, but you destroy the monastery in the process. Outside the monastery, there isn't too much to do besides bringing the Gyth Yan egg back to a shopkeeper and fighting some undead. While the monastery part is a great section, the Gyth Yan creche is just, I don't know, man. While it is cool seeing how much work was put into it from a world-building perspective, it wasn't super interesting from a gameplay perspective. When you first encounter the Gyth Yan, there's an oh shit moment that hits you when the guy with the greatsword misty steps at you from across the map. Attack action intact and ready to ruin your life. But as soon as the novelty of their psionic powers wears off, it's just rooms and hallways with the same enemies and very few hazards and environments to interact with. The only part that's a relatively different area, being the hatchery, is completely optional and can just be skipped. The boss of the area isn't even that wild either. His main power is to make you vulnerable to psychic damage, while the mages deal psychic damage to make your saves worse. Wow, a fight where the strategy is to kill the mages and then fight the boss. How did they think of this? Now the fight does become more interesting and dynamic in honor mode with the introduction of Wargaz using psionic blades as a legendary action. But most players aren't ever going to be interacting with the hardest difficulty in the game that features permadeath. This section isn't bad, I just don't think it's as cool as the other parts. When it comes to fantasy worlds and settings, no areas catch my interest quite like the Underdark. With the types of life that flourish in the deep, drow matriarchal societies, and mysteries of lost civilizations, the Underdark has so much to offer in the world of Faerun, and Baldur's Gate 3 does a fantastic job at bringing it to life. When you enter the Selûnite outpost, you're met with two ways to go. You can either exit out the front gate to encounter some minotaurs, or exit out the window and get ambushed by a spectator as you walk past the stone statues of the drow adventuring party. This fight is great. You have to balance dealing damage to the spectator, using your strikes to unpossessed targets, and look for opportunities to use the explosive mushrooms scattered around to your advantage. The unpetrified drow are weak enough that they aren't upstaging you in battle, but are strong enough that they make a small difference worth having, even if it is only for cannon fodder. As you walk around, you see how much effort that Larian took to make each section of the Underdark feel beautiful, distinct, and treacherous.
That's curious. What are those?
What are those? From exploring an abandoned wizard's tower, to helping out or fighting a myconoid colony that is battling against a tribe of Dwergar, to just helping a dude pick some mushrooms. It's wild how much progress I lost there. Holy shit. Like, can I not blast that shit? Come on, man. Don't be like that. No! Oh!
That drow near is going to be on his last gasp unless someone digs him out.
Yes, I'm aware, Shadowheart. I'm aware, okay? You know I'm also aware of? I'm aware of the fact that I just got fucked. I got fucked. You know what? We'll take the 4 HP. I don't even give a shit. I don't give a shit.
The
platform's covered in rust. Oh, the platform's covered in rust, dude. Whoa, bro. Oh, man, I lost my entire recording. Whoa, bro. Oh, and Karlach just jumps off the cliff. No fucking way, bro. Holy shit. Dude, it's like my life is a comedy. Eventually you make it to Grimforge, where you see the conflict that's taking place between the Cult of the Absolute and the Dwergar clan, with Nier, the true soul in this area, being trapped in a rockfall. You can either side with him, against him, or help out the Dwergar in a plot to betray him. Not gonna lie, it was pretty evil of the devs to have enemies with high strength, pushing attack, or Thunderwave in an arena by the lava. Although there are points where you can take the strategic height advantage, cover for choke points, or you can just join in on the fun, shoving people into the lava, since it works both ways. This is a really awesome fight. By this point, you've probably been hearing some murmurings of the secrets to smithing adamantine located nearby, and you can investigate around to come upon the ancient forge. This serves as the hardest challenge of Act 1, with some pretty difficult enemies, bastard-ass magma methods, and a boss fight with a giant automaton. There are plenty of hazards around for you to navigate, molds and mithril for you to collect your weapons, and armor to forge, and an amulet that makes you Raphael 100, 100, 100, 100. The Grim fight is well thought out by the developers. The fight has the perfect setup, with you hitting the hammer to bring the forge down, the lava filling the arena when the fight starts up, giving him vulnerability to bludgeoning damage, and Grim going after the last person to attack it. What they're clearly setting up is to lure Grim to hit him with the hammer in the middle, but the fight's completely doable without it, and more fun in my opinion. But the goal of the devs was never to tell you how to do the fight, but just to set things up and leave the rest to you. After winning, you get 2 pieces of adamantine equipment of your choice from the molds that you picked up in the dungeon. The scientific term for the Underdark section of this game would be classified as turbo hype. I love this part of the act. There's so many connecting storylines, diverse and unique areas, dope lore, environments that try to kill you, and competing factions. It's a world, or underworld as it were, that feels alive, and you're dropped right in the middle of it. The game even managed to show me why my DM banned Counterspell. Oh, dude, how many does this guy have? For the most part, that's what Act 1 has to offer. Now, obviously, there are tons of miscellaneous objectives that you can find, and there's always something new that you run into every playthrough. But those are most of the main story beats and big side objectives. There's so much content in this one section, and it's only 1/3 of the game. The design of this act clearly works so that every player will have a different experience on their first run of the game. From which allies they find first, to the encounters they run into along the road, to the items they find and classes they take, to choosing to explore the mountain pass or the Underdark. There's so many different experiences that can exist from player to player, and that's what's awesome about this act. The story beats and side quests that you want to interact with, the lore that you decide whether or not to read into, or finding the best builds to break the game with. There's something that this game puts in for everyone. Join me next time when we go over Acts 2 and 3 and talk about the criticisms and controversies of Baldur's Gate 3.